Welcome, everybody. We had our council meeting last year was held here in Chicago in person. We're this year broadcasting, as you know, by the web, and we know it's not there aren't the kind of opportunities for interchange and communication during a web meeting as there are in person, no matter how good the technology is. But when we tend to have the web meeting, it's an opportunity for more people to participate without the costs and the unpleasantness of travel today. So we happy to have you aboard. We are going to meet in person next year, and I'll talk a little bit about that during the course of my report. But this year, it's kind of good that we didn't meet in person because the night before last, Chicago had probably a world record rainfall, which flooded streets and major arteries and canceled hundreds of thousands probably of flights and into and out of O'Hare Airport. So, and then we had a little bit of snow today. So Chicago is not a great place to be the last couple days. So don't feel bad. First, I want to recognize Sarah Mahalik. Sarah, who today completes her second and final term as the chair of CRL's board of directors. Under Sarah's leadership, CRL has grown significantly its services and its resources and has put in place a more structured and formal governance framework. This involved the procedures for the formal evaluation and review of the executive and an establishment of an investment committee and an investment policy, which, as you'll hear in Deborah Carver's treasurer's report, has had very positive outcomes for CRL resources and operations. At this particular time in CRL's history, being chairman of the board has been a lot of work. I think a surprising amount of work, and surprisingly, it's been surprisingly time-consuming for Sarah, and for that I apologize. But things turned out well. I myself have benefited, though, from Sarah's tenure as a CRL's president and as a professional by having Sarah's guidance, her outstanding, extraordinary judgment, and her deep understanding of the research libraries world. And so for that, I'm truly grateful. The theme this year of my report and the annual report is momentum, more specifically building momentum. I'll talk here about the developments of the year and where we're going, and this will be a good background, I think, for the treasurer's report. In March, last month, CRL entered its 65th year of existence. Our core mission remains the same as it was in 1949. That is to ensure the continuing integrity and accessibility of the primary information, documentation, and evidence necessary for advanced research in the humanities, sciences, and social sciences, with particular emphasis on the hard sources, news in all of its forms, information produced by, for, and about governments and intergovernmental organizations, major non-governmental organizations, and other organizations that affect the world's events. Today we have, while the mission remains the same, today we have new ways of fulfilling that mission. A number of factors are changing how we have to respond and how we fulfill that mission. The traditional centers are not holding. Large national service organizations struggle to remain relevant to the challenges of research libraries today. Organizations like the Library of Congress and other national libraries, OCLC, ALA, National Endowment for the Humanities, Department of Education, National Science Foundation. These are all organizations and operations that are changing tremendously and have a big impact on our community, on this community of CRL libraries that support research. I think that this year we did more to support these libraries, to support our community of libraries and community of researchers that depend on those libraries. And I hope that you agree that we are building momentum. There are 4 parts to my report. First, the focus on the major domains, then supporting local investment and decisions with regard to collections. Third, building a critical mass of shared digital assets and what we do with those. And then Part 4, beyond 2014, beyond fiscal year 2014. Part 1, focusing on the four major domains. We've got four major domains that CRL is concentrating its resources on. We've staked out the first as news, law and government information, agriculture, and science, technology, and engineering. We've staked out at CRL's purview the immense world of primary historical and cultural evidence produced in both digital and print formats. On the hard information, primary sources, not the scholarly and scientific literature of the monographs, the e-books, and journals, but more we're concentrating on that vital wellspring of data and evidence constantly growing and changing from which scholarly and scientific literature draws. This, in part, is the natural consequence of CRL having amassed extensive tangible collections of this kind during the course of its history. And as a natural consequence or outgrowth of CRL's having served as a dependable source of these kinds of things for North American research libraries. Preserving these materials is also an important societal role that research libraries have traditionally played. Maintaining the evidence of human activity and experience in the institutions and environments in which that activity takes place, so that civil societies, based on a clear understanding of past and present realities, are possible. This also enables us to this focus has enabled us to concentrate CRL resources and your resources for maximum impact. The first area of focus, news. This year, we are sensing a tipping point in the preservation of news collections. We have been offered and are in the process of incorporating large bodies of newspaper collections from some of the member institutions. We're absorbing Slavic newspapers from Yale University, and we've begun to process the collection of foreign newspapers that UCLA has amassed over the course of its history. We're also pondering the integration or dealing with an enormous collection of newspapers that was divested of recently by the Hoover Institution at Stanford University and is now under the care of Stanford University Libraries. This year we expanded the World Newspaper Archive, the digital program that CRL undertook several years ago in collaboration with Redex Newsbank. That collaboration expanded to include larger collections of Latin American newspapers this year, digitizing of Slavic newspapers, and also we've begun negotiations with the British Library about incorporating some of the British Library collections into the World Newspaper Archive in the future. We've been digitizing more newspaper materials on site here at CRL from microfilm. These in response to requests from individual scholars and researchers at your institutions. We've increased our capacity to scan those. We've also put in place the ability to store and manage the digital files that result from those scanning. In fiscal year 2014, we'll devise a plan for further scaling up our digitization of print newspapers and other primary source materials and hosting the digital content. To address the problem of preserving born digital news, though, that's an entirely different problem, an entirely different challenge. We'll endeavor to expand our engagement with the major news publishers and aggregators of electronic news by increasing our licensing activity in this realm. This year, we negotiated favorable offers for purchase of access to electronic databases, major news electronic databases from ProQuest and Redex, and we expect to do more next year as well. Second area, law and government, or as we are increasingly referring to this realm as civil society. Last year in our meeting, our council meeting, business meeting, attendees affirmed the importance of our partnership with the Law Libraries Microform Consortium. This is a partnership under which CRL and Law Libraries Microform Consortium are digitizing massive amounts of primary news publications from law libraries and from CRL collections and from other collections around the country. This has resulted in the digitization and archiving of state legislative journals from CRL, all of CRL's Canadian legislative journals, digitizing primary publications of legal publications from African Commonwealth countries, African countries under the British Commonwealth, and digitization of early legal publications of the Republic of Haiti and Cuba. This year we're working on pre-Soviet Russian and Chinese materials as well. The current arrangement we have with Law Library Microform Consortium involves the digitization of these materials with some support from CRL and the access to those materials through the Law Library Microform Consortium digital library platform. There are some basic inequities in the costs of access to those two that is really unfair to the libraries that have been long-time supporters of Law Library Microform Consortium. This year we will propose that an opt-in model for libraries, for CRL libraries that are also members of the Law Libraries Microform Consortium, to alleviate the inequities in the cost of those access to those databases to members that are members of the Law Libraries Consortium. Essentially, the Law Libraries Consortium members are supporting LLMC directly, and they're also indirectly supporting through CRL, and so there's a bit of duplication there. On another front, government information. Many of our libraries are federal depository libraries. This is created for them, and they are bearing the burden and the cost of the maintenance of enormous corpora of federal government information, published federal government information. There are questions about whether this is really the best way to make government publications available to people in our time in the digital age. In the past, moreover, CRL has also acquired and preserved, actually quite extensively, the records of various U.S. government agency on microform from the National Archives and Records Administration. These were things like the microforms of the census reports, the microforms of the papers of the State Department, and the papers of the FBI and other federal agency, Environmental Protection Agency. We think that the microform platform obviously is not going to work in the era of where electronic records of the government are digital. We've also had some notable failures, for instance, the fiasco involved in the pulling from the web, the withdrawal from the web of some of the ERIC publications this year by the Department of Education. We think that we need to understand what roles libraries collectively and individually will play in ensuring the preservation and accessibility of government publications and records in the future. Do the roles of the National Archives and Records Administration and the GPO, in fact, change in an age of open data and open government? Are these roles the same in an age wherein agencies provide real-time access to government records? So, to lay the groundwork necessary to identify a collective course of action on this front for CRL and our libraries, we will map the production, distribution, and scholarly use of government and NGO information this year. Then, next April, we'll bring together representatives of NARA, GPO, and other appropriate parties with members of our research libraries community at CRL's annual meeting here in Chicago to try to create some consensus on the measures necessary to prevent the massive loss of historical government-produced content or its unavailability in the long term to scholars. The third area where we're focusing on is the area of agriculture. CRL has a long history of collecting the vernacular literature of agriculture. We have extensive holdings of commercial and technical journals related to agriculture and agricultural production from the 19th and early 20th century. Those are extensive, and those are things that were deposited here when CRL, soon after CRL was formed back in 1949. This year we began working with the U.S. Agricultural Information Network and the Agricultural National Information Center to undertake the systematic archiving and digitization of legacy agricultural publications in the field of agriculture. This began as an IMLS-funded inquiry into how we could best archive the print agricultural literature of the United States. What it wound up with what we decided and what we concluded was that archiving the print without providing adequate, appropriate means of access to that print would probably be unsustainable, certainly unreliable in the long run. So we have begun to support digitization of these publications in tandem with print archives. This is under the rubric Project Series. Under Project Series, libraries are provided a small amount of funding to digitize collections digitize cereal agricultural materials in their areas, in their collections. In return for that small amount of funding, the libraries commit to, number one, maintain the print in those collections for the long term. And if they choose eventually to not retain, then CRL they have committed to offering those materials to CRL for long-term archiving. In addition, the digital files are posted in open access platforms of their choice, but the digital files, the OCR, and the metadata are also provided to CRL for its shared digital collections as well. And so the recent awardees for this program are Kansas State University, Michigan State, University of Minnesota, Mississippi State, University of Nebraska, the Ohio State University, Purdue, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So probably this may come as a surprise to some of you who work at who represent those institutions, but remember, this is not the Nobel Prize. These are small amounts of funding that are provided to these institutions to digitize collections. But again, it's a way of CRL supporting not only a development of a shared central collection of CRL materials, but also the further development and the delivery and accessibility of collections at the CRL libraries. Last year at our meeting, David Magyar and others encouraged us to think about this focus area of agriculture in not just as farming and food production, but more broadly. And we've taken that to heart. We really believe that agriculture is not just the production of food and the production of, it's not just cultivation and the production of food. We think that it's the intersection of a number of large domains, including the environment, economic development, labor, and trade. So we believe it's an important area for CRL to be active in. This year, we're just supporting print archiving and digitization of collections in this area. Eventually, we hope to begin negotiating the licensing or acquisition of major agricultural databases, possibly in cooperation with our colleagues at NERL. So, the fourth focus area that we've been concentrating the resources on is the history of science, technology, and engineering. CRL has deep holdings, historical holdings in commercial and industrial and technical journals. Again, as in the area of agriculture, this is a legacy of the deposit years, the years when CRL libraries were depositing large amounts of material in CRL. Under our partnership with Linda Hall Library, we initiated document delivery of the 40,000 journal titles at Linda Hall Library to CRL libraries, and that service began on July 1st. Linda Hall is providing a reliable source of articles from print journals. Already the usage of these collections, the Linda Hall collections by CRL libraries, has exceeded our expectations. We are now doing as much document delivery service from Linda Hall libraries as we are doing from CRL collections altogether as a whole. The top 10 users so far, as of the end of December, are Penn State University, University of Minnesota, University of Michigan, Kansas State, Ohio State, University of Illinois, Oregon State, Texas A&M, University of Wisconsin, University of Arkansas. So obviously some of the bigger CRL libraries are getting a great deal of benefit from it. We think there could be a lot more benefit here. We think that a lot of institutions can rely on Linda Hall holdings as backup for their own holdings, particularly in times when you have to reduce the number of titles you're subscribing to. We also believe that this could be particularly valuable to the smaller colleges and universities in CRL's community, that this makes a pool of 40,000 titles available to faculty at your institutions. And so we think that that could be a real boon to your service to faculty at your institution. So this is more than archiving. We are working with Linda Hall Library to identify shared priorities for further development of the joint CRL and Linda Hall collections. And so this afternoon, our collections forum will focus on the Linda Hall Library. We'll focus on the upcoming collections in the areas of science, technology, and engineering, particularly historical collections. And Steve Bosch will share his analysis of the overlap and the strengths of the joint CRL Linda Hall collections, and we'll talk about the strategy for further development of them. So I hope you can participate. I hope people from your institution can participate. Later this year, the paper database will tell you what journals that Linda Hall Library has in detail, down to issue level validation, issue level holdings analysis, and will give you a better sense of the comparison of those titles against our CRL holdings. It will also enable you to compare them to your own holdings as well. So those are the 4 areas in which we focused our resources in this year. That gives you a little bit of sense of where we're going with them in terms of collection development for next year. Part 2, supporting how we support local collection decisions and investment. Apart from building and delivering collections, we're also doing a lot to support your decisions on investment in your own print holdings and on new digital resources. We're doing this because we believe that this represents a large and growing percentage of your annual local investment, your institution's investment, your investment in maintaining and serving print collections and building print collections, your investment in acquisition of electronic databases, your investment in participation in participation in digital repository services of organizations like HathiTrust and Portico and them. So we've been doing this in 4 ways. Through forums, data, providing data, doing licensing, and technologies, providing technologies to support this activity. First, forums. We have these forums that CRL has been hosting and supporting facilitate the sharing of the vast reservoirs of expertise that our libraries have in the form of their staff, their specialists, and the expertise that your libraries have invested in. The Print Archiving Network forums happen twice a year in conjunction with ALA, and those are meetings at which the leaders of the various U.S. and Canadian print archiving efforts share best practices and share information, share their thinking. The News Roundtable that we will have later this year in conjunction with this year's ALA will be a 1-day in-person conference in Chicago the Thursday before ALA, and that will be about electronic news. We've done webinars this year that have been particularly well attended. The most heavily attended was one in text mining, which gives people a good sense of, which is designed to give people a good sense of the challenges and opportunities and possibilities of mining of electronic resources. And this, that we think, informs the discussion about the acquisition and licensing of electronic resources. We also had a very good webinar, very heavily attended webinar on science, technology, and engineering collections on the Linda Hall arrangement. And we believe that that will probably increase your library's ability to exploit this relationship. We had teleconferences, which are smaller, confidential calls with selected people in that collection development at your libraries on new and emerging digital collections and digital efforts, like the Reveal Digital effort to digitize radical and alternative press newspapers, and the Gale Cengage 19th Century Collections Online, which is it's a large and growing digital database that Gail has been marketing. We also co-sponsored a symposium at Duke University in December on the future of international studies and the implications for libraries. And the report on that is out and will be posted to the CRL's website. That's a preliminary report, but it makes fascinating reading, I think. We're also in November we expect to be hosting or holding a pre-conference at Charleston for those representatives of CRL libraries who are going to the Charleston conference on the commercial packaging of government information. This is leading up to our meeting next year, our conference next year on government information and access to government information. We think that the commercial packagers are a very important piece of this story, and so we'll be looking at them hard at the Charleston pre-conference. So, the third area is areas of data. The paper database is now online. That's what you see on the screen, the landing page for the paper database. The paper database now has the entire archived holdings, the entire holdings of the West Archive of CRL's JSTOR, and is growing gradually to include Linda Hall. It will include by this time next year Linda Hall titles. We have about 25,000 titles represented there and the archiving commitments connected with those. By this time next year, we hope to have about 70 or 80,000 titles represented in there, which will include all of the Linda Hall holdings. And we've also been notified that JSTOR will contribute to the paper database the holdings of the Harvard Dark Archive of JSTOR. So we expect that by next year, the paper registry will tell you what titles you no longer have to retain and serve to a great extent. And we will continue to develop the paper registry to handle ever more granular information about the holdings of the print archives. And so we hope that this database will accommodate a lot more data in a lot more varieties of format, and that it will be a reliable registry of a critical mass of data on print archiving. Practical effect will be to enable your library to withdraw or divest of any or all of the titles that are represented in the various archives. It will also, that decision is up to you, but what the paper registry is designed to do is to provide you the data that you need to make an informed decision about that kind of thing, about how many copies of a particular journal you need to retain, that kind of thing, and to be able to make that decision in a way that is later defensible, that is based on data and based on due diligence. So. We have also been working hard on the ICON database behind the scenes. That's not quite available and ready for people to use, but that is a comparable database of newspaper holdings. And this is designed to register the holdings of paper copies and microform copies and of important U.S. and foreign newspapers, and also to register the holdings of those in particular major commercial databases as well. So, in the area of licensing, we've been doing some negotiating offers for favorable to CRL libraries for a number of databases. As I mentioned before, a lot of this is in the area of news. We hope, we really aspire to provide for CRL libraries the opportunity to have end-to-end coverage of historical and current news in databases, through databases, and to have that in a way that's usable by scholars and that's affordable. And so the negotiation of offers from Redex and ProQuest for some major databases, both current and historical databases, is the beginning, just the beginnings of that. We hope to add more and to expand that. Last year, Dan Hazen and others encouraged us in licensing, which is a relatively new activity for CRL, to set clear goals for our work. That we are not, that no one needs another buying club, and that we want to avoid the usual buying club template, which focuses heavily on the idea of discounts, the idea of retail versus wholesale pricing, that kind of things, ideas which are somewhat specious and somewhat artificial. We are focusing therefore, on gaining libraries' leverage in the dealings with vendors, in gaining not just most favorable cost or prices for databases, but serious archiving of these materials, serious functionality, the kind of functionality that's going to reduce the siloization of these kinds of things. We hope we can get these. We think that working with the vendors as representing the larger CRL membership, that we'll be able to do more of this. We have also just concluded arrangements with the Northeast Research Libraries Consortium for that operation to move from Yale University to CRL. The Northeast Research Libraries Consortium is a consortium that represents about 28 major member institutions. About 15 or so of those are CRL members as well, but also about another 40 or so participating affiliates. We think and we hope that having Neural here at CRL, that we will be better able to work together to find synergies between the operations of Neural and CRL's own licensing operation, to share more in the way of data and information and analysis, and also to create some collective leverage in the dealings with the vendors in the areas in which we focus, in the areas of primary source materials, large archives, large humanities and social science collections. Less so in the area of journals and ebooks, but we think that we don't have a big role in that area, but the other areas I think are terribly important right now. We've been able to do things so far like get 2 new representatives on the Gale Advisory Board for further development of the 19th century collections online, and we think that that kind of thing will help not only get better collections delivered to libraries, but also get better collections built in the future, better and less redundant collections. So in technologies, we've been increasing our investment in technology. There are a number of CRL systems that support current work. The Confluence system online provides working space for about 24 different CRL-based groups, committees, and projects, including the board of directors that uses that space. The contact information system that we have has enabled us to do better in the way of knowing who does what at member institutions, so knowing who to bother and who not to bother on any particular topic. And this year we've been developing e-desiderata, which is still in the developmental stage. That's what you see on your screen, which is a system, an online platform for systematization and organization of our licensing activity. The e-desiderata will incorporate the ability for members to suggest databases for CRL to explore terms for license, suggest databases for CRL to do analysis and reviews of, and that kind of thing. It will support our licensing decision making. It will also, we hope, make the pipeline a bit more obvious and transparent to you. Carla Streeb last year said that what would be great to have would be a better sense of what's coming down the road, what's coming down the pike in the way of major databases that will be available to CRL libraries or offered to CRL libraries for purchase. And the e-desiderata we expect will help that. In all these things, I'm happy to point out that I think in all the ways in which we've been supporting the investment and decision making about collections at member libraries, I do think we're seeing a ripple effect after a couple of years of this from CRL. We are the licensing activity has been very important and I think successful to the extent we've done it so far. A number of our roundtables have prompted and inspired initiatives at different institutions, like the important Guatemala National Police Archive, digital archive at the University of Texas, the acquisition of that by the University of Texas, Columbia University's harvesting and archiving of human rights documentation from the web, that kind of thing. So the Reveal Digital project is very much draws on the World Newspaper Archive model that we've developed here at CRL for community digitization, community access to newspapers of the world. So we are relatively confident that we are growing our capability to support rational strategic discourse and emerging consensus on collections and collection development. Part 3, sharing CRL's growing collection of digital assets. We, in the last year, the good news is that the CRL shared collection is increasingly digital. In the last few years, we've been amassing a large reservoir of digital assets in the DDS, which is our on-demand digitization service, the server that that holds those materials. We have about 4.8 million pages now. The World Newspaper Archive is up to about 2.7 million pages of content. The LLMC Digital, we've done 5.6 million pages just in the past few years. And the American Periodicals with ProQuest have digitized 3 million pages. In all of our dealings with digitization partners, including ProQuest and Redex and the Law Library Microform Consortium, we always reserve the right to take possession of the digital files, the OCR, and the metadata generated by those projects. That content, presently hosted on others' platforms, is becoming substantial. It now, as these figures show, adds up to about 18 million pages, and this will continue to grow. We need to make provisions for hosting that material in a way that will generate the greatest benefits to CRL libraries in the long term. And so much of this material is under copyright, so we'll have to be held within our own community. A lot of what we digitize on request for scholars is within the copyright period, we know. But in the next year, we'll explore potential platforms for managing that content. We have to. It's become too big a collection not to make provisions for. Part 4, and the final part of my report. We need to define and to begin to implement a clear, plausible vision for an era in which primary documentation and evidence are electronic rather than physical. In such an era, how are we going to guarantee the survival and accessibility of critical primary evidence for scholarly consideration, as we have in the past, in the print and microform era? We need more than a plan for CRL in this. We need to define and articulate a collective role for all research libraries, and then to decide what supporting role CRL can play in executing that plan. This new collective role will have less to do with acquisition, storage, and even with, quote, the preservation of materials as we normally understand that word, preservation. In the digital realm, preservation and access are hard to separate. And the onus of delivery of content and the onus of access, as we know, has shifted decisively to the publishing sector. So we will have to decide what this role will be. The assumption that everything inevitably is moving towards digital access really, at the same time, underestimates the sheer volume of material that has been preserved in microform, and that it also ignores the factors that prevent much of those materials preserved in microform from being made accessible indiscriminately to or commercially exploited. In a word, there is an enormous amount of material that will be very difficult to put on the open web ever. This challenge will require some new capabilities from CRL, and we have to decide and figure out how we can convert more of our fixed assets to capability. So more of the assets that we've collected and generated over the past 60-some years of CRL's history. We'll be doing that in part. One of the ways we start that is by the investigation this year on government information, that laying the groundwork of data and information about how government information is produced, distributed, maintained, managed, and even consumed. So we've done that in the area of news. This second stage is to do it in the area of government. And the third stage, who knows? But this is emerging as CRL's strategy for digital preservation. It's providing a foundation of information and data to support rational, collective decisions made by your libraries and by the members of the CRL community. So, I've been speaking today a lot in the we, and we is us, not just we at CRL, but I'm referring to the people at CRL and to the CRL membership. Together, we represent an extraordinary and incomparable pool of knowledge, expertise, and ideas and imagination. Next year, we'll convene in Chicago. Mark your calendars. And we hope you can join us then. I hope this report has given you a good context in which to hear the report from Deborah Carver, the report from CRL Treasurer Deborah Carver. I want to take this opportunity, though, to thank Deborah for her extraordinary service as treasurer and for her dealing with the complexities of an organization of 270 members and as an umbrella for over a dozen autonomous programs and projects. The finances of CRL are not simple, and Deborah's done an astonishingly good job of mastering those in her time as treasurer of CRL. Thanks, Deborah.